And companies, too, set their values so high that they can easily walk right underneath them. That's not how it's supposed to be. Values are something wonderful and useful. Values make all the difference. In my podcast, I'll show you the best way to approach values. Wordy Impulse, the podcast with Dr. Ulrich Vogel. A warm welcome to all our listeners to today's episode, the first in a trilogy, in which I'll be talking about teams, team roles, conflicts that can arise, solutions, and also diagnostics in this context. That's why the first episode is called The Invisible Power of Team Roles. How to avoid team chaos and conflicts. Yeah, who doesn't know what that's like? But first of all, why a team at all? Yeah, collaboration, the recipe for humanity's success, as Yves Morieux says. He described it brilliantly online in a TED Talk, but I've mentioned that a few times already. So, I want to get straight to the point here. The secret of a dream team often lies in invisible roles. Maybe you're curious about what those are. Or roles in the team that are filled by more than one person. That's actually a hidden recipe for conflict. Or, to put it provocatively, team chaos or top team. And the difference might lie in the things you've possibly overlooked so far. So, the whole thing is a bit more complex, and that's what we want to dig into. I'll break it down into 4 sections. Let's see, what are team roles anyway? And then to briefly shed some light on typical conflict situations, and of course, also on solutions. To offer them, and yes, to point you to where you can find more about this. And yes, then the question, why does knowing about conflicts, why does knowing about the roles actually resolve conflicts? So, let's dive in. What are team roles, anyway? That's actually not so clear-cut, at least in terms of definitions. People always think, well, maybe those are technical roles or functional roles, but the team roles we're talking about here are different. Although sometimes there can be some functional overlap. There can often actually be a coordinator, and in that case, it's meant functionally, but a coordinator role is also included in team roles when it comes more to personality traits. So the core message is actually that every person in a team has a certain role, and these roles have an influence, in the end, on whether a team works or fails. And here, it's not about technical, content-related, or methodological knowledge, but rather about what suits someone personally, how they're wired, what they're good at, and maybe what they're not so good at. And how are we supposed to use these great, unique people who work together, bring them together in such a way that everything really fits together? And so that the sum is greater than the individual parts. In other words, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, as the saying goes. Maybe let's start with value science. The team roles are based on 3 value dimensions. First, heart, so, roles that are socially oriented, for example, the typical team player, as we usually say. Then there's the hand dimension, which is the practical value dimension. Contributing here is important when it comes to implementation, and also creativity. Design is a key aspect in this area. And then we have the brain dimension, which, when translated into team roles, means bringing in structure, systematics, and quality. So just imagine, you probably know someone who's a typical creative type, always bursting with ideas. Or you know someone who's a doer, who jumps right in without hesitation. And now, if you look at it, creative minds and doers, and both are missing. Or even if just one of them is missing. What happens then? So, it's actually a bit more complex than that. And let's take a look at some typical conflict situations as well. Let's take the example of double staffing. Say you have 2 quality representatives, and they end up butting heads pretty quickly. Yeah, if you have 2 coordinators, you'll quickly end up with power struggles. Or you have 2 drivers, but maybe they're not heading in exactly the same direction. And then it really gets tricky. So you need to be careful here because people often get in each other's way. Another thing is, maybe some roles are typically missing. What happens if you don't have a quality representative? If you don't have one, then everyone just takes off running. And maybe we crash into a wall really quickly because we just don't get to the depth, details go unnoticed, and things collapse like a house of cards. Or also, as I often find, when an observer is missing. Let's say you don't always have a quality representative, but it's really about bringing in a bit of an outside perspective, or rather, looking at things neutrally and objectively while you're doing something, looking at how you're actually doing it and what comes out of it. That's what comes out of it. So, an observer, I think that's also pretty important. And if that's missing, problems can crop up pretty quickly. Or even conflict situations, like overlooking certain skills. For example, when a go-getter says, yeah, something's missing here, namely, the networker. And then they just take that on as well, and before you know it, that person is overwhelmed, stretched too thin, and then things fall apart. So yeah, what's the takeaway? Conflicts often come up because team roles aren't consciously assigned, because, really, no one actually knows what they are. What are these 3 social orientation roles, the 3 action-oriented roles, the 3 cerebral roles? We're often already doing pretty well. With heart, hands, and mind, but how that actually gets translated and how we really fill those team roles properly, that's often left hanging. In the fog, or left unspoken. Sometimes you can feel it, but actually taking the time to look into it more, I think that really makes sense. So, what are some first aid quick fixes for the team? By the way, we've actually put together a first aid kit for that. You can download it from our website. I think I'll just go ahead and do that now too. I'll put something in the show notes so you can download it. It's about 7 painful situations that you might face as a leader. With your team, that's what it's about, and what you can do, both in the short term and in the long run, so it doesn't happen again. Now, for you and for today, identifying roles is the first step. So, who takes on which tasks and why? And that's what I call typical team chartering. So, onboarding yourselves as a team and asking the right questions along the way. But we'll do that in the workshop in February, where we'll go into more detail. It's also important to recognize gaps. Which role is missing? What happens if the networker is missing? Then we can't really spread out in the organization or make ourselves visible enough to actually get things moving. And also getting feedback, so clarifying whether someone feels comfortable in their role or not. So, the question of fit. Keeping an eye on that. Someone's taken on a role, but does it actually fit? Or is someone hiding away or burning out their energy? And consciously adjusting the roles as well. For example, that an observer temporarily takes on the coordinator role until it's clearly filled. So, the advantage is obvious. With a clear distribution of roles, responsibilities become tangible, and as a result, conflicts are actually minimized. Thank you. They're already minimized because tangible also means visible in some way. And when the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, or rather, since there are even more hands, when all the hands know what the others are doing, then things are headed in the right direction. So, why does being aware of role conflicts actually resolve them? That's exactly what I'm getting at. For example, we recently had a situation like this during a consulting session. A team used our team role tool. They realized that without a driver, someone to push things forward, they were stagnating. And after making adjustments, we actually saw the team become much more productive and motivated. So, this kind of analysis can really help, and as communication improves, clear expectations emerge, leading to more effective collaboration, since everyone knows what they contribute. And ultimately, higher motivation. because the roles actually match people's strengths. For example, I would be a terrible quality representative. Oh God, that just wouldn't work at all. I'm actually a pretty good driver, sometimes. But sometimes I overdo it, as I hear in feedback, and maybe I expect too much from people. I'm also not a good observer. I always need someone to keep an eye on things. Luckily, we have someone great for that on our team. So everything works properly. The term sounds pretty casual. Yeah, team roles. Everyone has their role, but there's actually a lot to it. So take a closer look at that, for real. And that's why the message is really simple. Today, just give it a try, find out which team roles dominate in your team. Our team role tool will show you right away the dynamics and development opportunities. It always starts with yourself, so just try it out for yourself. Which of the new team roles we've developed fits you best? Which one fits you second best and third best? So, we call these the primary, secondary, and tertiary roles. I'll put the link in the show notes where you can test it for free on our website. Maybe you'd like to give it a try yourself. All right, and I'll finish with a call to action. Your team can achieve so much more if every role is consciously filled. Honestly, it's a cardinal sin not to pay attention to the team and the roles. Please do it. And now, thank you so much for sticking with us right to the end. I'm looking forward to you listening to the other two parts of our trilogy about team roles as well. All right, take care. See you then. Bye.